Hey everybody, it's Jamie here with the OMG Show. I'm so excited that you are tuning in today, and this is a very special episode because it is something that I hold near and dear to my heart. And today it's all about finding the right coach for you and how to know how to hire the right coach. And this is a very interesting topic because there has been a boom in the coaching industry, I would say in the last few years, with a huge influx of people who are coming into quote unquote coaching. And it's becoming easier and easier to become a coach, to market yourself online as a coach, and to grow a coaching business without having any credibility. And I share this because I have had some horrible experiences with coaches, and like gut-wrenching experiences. And I have let go of them. I have learned from them. I have learned that I know exactly what I don't want to be in a coach as a result of those bad experiences. And so today, what I want to share with you are some ninja tips for you around figuring out how to find the right coach, how to determine if it's time for you to have a coach, and how to figure out which coach to hire. Okay, so first and foremost, yes, I highly recommend talking to some of their coachees, right? This is an obvious one. And the reason why I recommend that is to get a sense for the style and type of person that they are working with, right? Like what is the personality type of the client or the coachee, that you are working with, and if you are similar to that person. Because the more similar you are to the people, I don't want to say similar, that's probably not the right thing, but personality wise, if there is some overlap there, you can venture to assume and determine if the person will potentially be a good fit based on talking to the other people. Now, one thing I want you to remember, and this is something that happened to me, is that if you go on somebody's website, they're always going to post people who are happy or thrilled with the work that you've done. And I say this in full transparency because I've fallen for this. I've fallen for, let me call the references that they have, let me check with the people that they have worked with, yada, yada, yada. And I got great feedback. So one of the ways in which you can actually dig deeper with that conversation is to ask some questions to the person who's being coached, but also go on social media and look at their following, look at their engagement, look at, and again, that's probably not the best, engagement on social media is not always a gauge for how successful someone can make you as a coach, or in your business, but look for people who you could reach out to about the character of that person, right? And you'll find that there will be people who are kind of like consistently posting. Reach out to those people and find out about that person, because the more conversations that you can have, and I'm not saying like go all, Secret Service and, do a full background security check or anything like that. But what I'm saying is do your research, do a Google, see what they're like on social media, ask to be added to their friend list on social media, and kind of see what they have going on, see who's engaging, see if they get positive feedback, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the next thing that I want to talk about is getting clear on your expectations. So a coach is not someone who is going to do it for you. A coach is going to help you, guide you, work with you to determine how to get from where you are to where you want to be. Okay. And that's most coaches, right? And I'm just using that as an example. But when you go into a coaching relationship, it's super important to be able to have clear expectations around what is the coach's responsibility and what is the coachee's responsibility. Then once you have those two things in place, it's also important to talk about, is the coaching program, right? And most coaches have this stuff mapped out on their website. We have kind of two approaches. We have our approach where it's more self-directed, where we kind of determine the sessions and the self-direction of the sessions. We also can get really specific with people who decide to join our 6-month program and literally walk you through that process of building a digital business ecosystem. Other clients who join our 3-month program, we usually identify what the goals are at the beginning and then create each week as we go. We co-author the sessions as we go versus having an agenda for each one of the sessions along the way. And so what I want you to understand is I want you to get super clear about what your expectations are when you're working with a coach. Then once you get your expectations clear, and again, this depends, there's a lot of different ways in which you can hire a coach. You could hire a mindset coach. You could hire a marketing coach. You could hire a business coach. You could hire a life coach. You could hire a psychic coach. You could hire a money coach. Like there's so many like a relationship coach. There's so many iterations of a coach. So step 1, talk to their coachees. Step 2, talk to their coachees and do some research. Like give it a Google. Be willing to go to the 2nd or 3rd page of Google. I also want you to get clear about your expectations, right? Like who's doing what, how are the sessions defined, and what do I need to come to the table prepared with? Like for us, we really love working with people who have a clear idea of who their ideal client is. They typically have some content, but they don't know how to continue to get like lead generation to come in consistently, or they don't really have a social media and digital marketing strategy that can help them grow. So the next thing is to get clear about your goals. So when you're working with a coach, whether it's for 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, whatever it is, it's really important to understand exactly what your goals are for working with them and what is the expected outcome. Like, so at the end of this relationship, I can expect to have and not and I know that this sounds really silly, but I share this because last year I was working with a coach and oh, this is a good one. One of the things that happened is this person told me after 13 years in business that I should rebrand. And I trusted this person, and I literally went on a goose chase, right? Or, a dog chasing its tail, trying to figure out what is the name, how should I rebrand, how am I going to do this, what is that process going to look like, literally I spent 6 weeks of my life thinking about this rebrand. And once I kind of was like, whoa, wait a second, the scope of a rebrand for a company that is 13 years old, like a complete rebrand, not just a logo rebrand, but like a complete name change, is monumental. And I took a step back and I was like, rebrand was not anywhere in the goals that I had at all when I set out working with this coach. And I share that because I want you to make sure that when you do work with a coach, when you hire the right coach, they're going to help keep you accountable and keep you on track for that sort of stuff. But what I want you to understand is you need to have clearly defined goals when you start working with somebody, whatever that is. And it might not necessarily be a tangible goal. It might just be, I want to feel more confident around XYZ. And if that's the case, what you have to do, whether, your coach does this with you or you do this for yourself, you have to say, like, what does confidence mean to me? So confidence is more ease with doing Facebook Live, more ease with putting myself out there, less anxiety around blah, blah, blah. So come up with 4 to 5 questions and score yourself before you start working with them, and then score yourself afterwards to really determine whether or not you accomplish those goals, right? So if it's an intangible thing, tell your coach, like, hey, I want to score myself on day 1 and I want to score myself on day 90 of working together. So that way you have that, you can show that progression. Okay. Then the next thing I want you to do is I want you to have a deep conversation with the coach about their successes, their triumphs, their failures. Like, I want you to have them tell you about their journey in business. And the reason why I ask you to ask people about this, because I think it's important. Like, we talk about like wins and successes and achievement, and I find it important to also talk about the triumphs, right? Because in my opinion, it's not a matter of if we fail. Like, I failed like more times than I could even count as an entrepreneur, but I've always gotten back up. And so what I want you to extract from this coach is, like, what is that biggest triumph, and how is that how did they overcome that triumph? Like, what was the biggest obstacle that they've had to overcome, and how did that impact their journey, right? Because I know for me, when we switched from really being in person, because in full transparency, I just burned out. I just totally burned out. And when we shifted from in-person work solely in Rhode Island to being solely online, it was a really hard transition. And at the time, it wasn't a huge company. We were probably doing, or I was probably doing, because it was just me and an intern, a non-paid intern. We were doing between $90,000 and $100,000 a year. And we were doing that very consistently. And I literally had 2 or 3 months where we had $0 come in, because I was literally I'm not running around anymore, because I was literally spending 12, 13, 14 hours in the car. And it was insane. I was eating lunch in the car because I was networking so much, and I was meeting with all these people, and I would sit and develop websites and social media plans off Wi-Fi, sitting outside of Panera or in Panera. I remember one day I had 7 meetings in a Panera, and I had breakfast, lunch, and dinner there, and it was just insanity. And I just said I don't want to do this anymore. This isn't why I work for myself. And we literally stopped. I just stopped. I just literally said, I'm not doing BNI anymore. I'm not doing this. I just can't physically, mentally, emotionally do this anymore. I don't want to live out of my car. And I stopped, and there were 3 months where I literally had $0 come in. I'll never forget this. And I was like, holy shit. I think I made a big mistake by changing this business model, because if you know anything about BNI, I left BNI, so I stopped getting referrals, because that's kind of how BNI works. And I wasn't going to any of the chamber meetings or any of that sort of stuff. We were finishing up the projects that we had, but we had $0 new dollars in business coming in. And that was really scary, because it was just me at the time. I was living on my own. I had an apartment in Narragansett, and I'm like, oh my God, how am I going to pay for my bills? And it just it was one of those things where it's I don't want to take money out of savings. I don't want to this. And I something just happened where this switch just flipped in my head. It's I can do the same sort of networking that I did in person, but I need to do that online. And that's really where I started posting in groups and getting really strategic and doing all that stuff. But I will never forget that point of that shift, right? Because you think you think, oh, it's going to be so easy or it's going to be whatever. And it's like, no, it takes time and work and effort. And, even starting the business in college, like I knew I was unemployable. I'll never forget it. I worked at a McDonald's from the time I was like 15 to the time I was like, I don't know, 18 or so. And I was like one of the youngest managers there. And I hated it. I hated being like told what to do. So I became the manager there, and I still like the assistant manager there. And I still hated the job. I hated like, oh, my schedule is dictated by whatever, the general manager says. And I went and worked for my aunt for 2 years, and I was graduating college that year, and I'm like looking for a job because I had just finished an internship that was like horrible. I'll never forget it. I worked for this PR firm out of East Providence, and I was literally going there 5 days a week for free. And I would go there and I would literally make copies of stuff. And it was, I would make copies of stuff. I would literally get coffee for people. I would make copies and I would highlight things where the company's name was listed in magazines. And I kid you not, it was like files and files and files and files. And like they had this thing where you had to make like 3 copies of the same thing, and then you had to highlight it 3 times, and it went in this binder. And it was like, I finished that internship because I had to. And I basically said, I'm never working for anybody else ever again. And those, like, I didn't mean to go off on a tangent. That was not the plan for this podcast episode. However, I think it's one of those things where when you start to talk about like your own successes and triumphs, like you can really put yourself through that. And I remember when I started my business, like, yeah, I still lived at home, but I was in college at the time, and my parents didn't help me. My senior year, they didn't help me pay for school. So I was working full time. I was going to school full time at night, and I started my business on the side. And I just like closed my eyes and I said, if I'm going to do it now is the time to do it. I have absolutely nothing to lose. And the first few years were really hard. Like we didn't go from 0 to 6 figures in 3 years. It took 2-3 years to really start to make that money where I felt confident and I knew we had money coming in consistently. And then, then we got really consistent. And again, like the industry shift, like I said, around 2010, we went through this whole in-person to 2009, 2010, we went from this in-person thing to this not in-person thing. And, these are all parts of things that make up my entrepreneurial journey and make up my coaching story. And so what I want you to understand is that when you go to hire a coach, or when you go to find somebody to work with, it's so important to understand their story, and it's so important to like watch their videos and figure out their style and determine if they're a good fit, but like understand who they are as a person. Like I have had like a wild entrepreneurial journey being in business for nearly 15 years. And so I have worked with literally probably over 1,000 different entrepreneurs at this point in my career, and I'm only 35 years old. And that's something to be said. And I share that not to brag, but I share that because I want you to understand that if you're working with a coach or you're working with entrepreneurs, then it's one of those things where the faster you can kind of learn from their mistakes and piggyback off of, repurpose some of the things that they've done and implement them into your own business in your own way, the faster you're going to have success. And then the other thing that I want to share today, because I know I went off on a bit of a tangent about asking about their successes and triumphs and business history. But what I want you to understand is that when you enter into a coaching relationship, you have to expect to put in time outside of the call. So if you're going to have a successful coaching relationship, it's really important to understand that that is going to require a bit of work and implementation on your end. So implementation might simply be like meditating if you're working with like a mindset coach, or, creating a vision board, or, if you're working with somebody like me who's going to help you map out your marketing strategy, that might be like working on an opt-in or working on your website or whatever that might be. I share that because I often find that people don't actually expect to have to do a lot of work outside of the calls, but I think it's something that really should be mentioned, because depending upon the coach that you're working with, you're going to have an hour to two each week outside of the calls to actually have to do things and implement. Alex Sharfin, the team and I probably spend 2 hours a week implementing his stuff every week for the past few weeks, and it's worth it and it's paying off. But I share that because my expectation was it wasn't going to take 2 hours a week. My expectation was like an hour, maybe less, because we're 3 months into the program. We're 4 months into the program, and I did not expect to be 3 or 4 months into the program and still having to be spending 2 hours a week. And so I think it's important to understand, and that's no fault of theirs. That's probably on my end, or we're just slow. But I shared that because I want you to understand that you have to expect to put in some time outside of the calls. And so it's a really good question to say, like, hey, if these are my goals for our work together, how much time can I expect to spend outside of these calls to have to make that happen, just so you can allot the time to make sure that it's a success for both sides of the coaching relationship. And so I hope this was super helpful for you. I'm just going to do a quick recap. So talk to their coaches, do a little research, go to the second and third page of Google. Get clear about your expectations for working with a coach and what the expected outcome is of the coaching relationship. Get super clear on your goals and what you want to accomplish together. Ask about their successes and triumphs in their business history so that you can get a better understanding for who they are, where they've been, and the struggles that they faced along the way. And then, of course, figure out what is the expectation around the amount of time that you'll have to spend outside of calls to help make this program a success. So I am so excited that you tuned in to my episode on how to hire the right coach for your business. If you haven't already, I suggest that you head over to www.omggrow.com and grab my free 2-part training on how to create 2 weeks worth of content in under 30 minutes. This is a game-changing content creation process that we have clients literally all over the world who are implementing this and getting crazy results because they're streamlining their social media and content creation process. So I highly recommend you get it. I hope you all have a successful day, and we'll talk to you soon.